You finally sit down on the couch after a long, exhausting day. You know you need to get up and brush your teeth. It is literally just 10 feet away, right down the hallway. You genuinely want to do it. You know you absolutely should do it for your own health. But you simply do not move. You feel like you are suddenly trapped behind an invisible, impenetrable wall of heavy glass. The world looks at this behavior and aggressively calls you lazy. But neuroscience calls it task-switching paralysis. It is a known, heavily documented executive function glitch that is draining your daily energy. But here is the secret. It also hides a massive cognitive advantage. Let us talk about what your brain is doing. Before we go deeper into the science of why you freeze, if you have ever felt this invisible wall, hit subscribe. Join a community of people who actually understand how your unique mind works. Now, let us break down exactly what happens when you lock up. You are not lacking discipline. You are lacking the neurochemical bridge required to change your state of being. Society assumes that all tasks are created equal. They assume that stopping one thing and starting another is a simple, frictionless choice. But clinicians who study ADHD, autism, and executive dysfunction know the profound truth. Task initiation and task switching are some of the absolute highest cost operations your human brain can ever attempt to perform. When you are scrolling on your phone, you are existing in a low-effort, high-reward state. To forcefully stop that action, stand up and begin an entirely new sequence, like getting ready for bed, your brain has to execute a massive metabolic shift. If your internal executive resources are running low, the engine simply stalls out. The world calls this lazy, but science calls it highly efficient energy conservation. We need to look very closely at your executive functioning. Think of it as the brain's internal management system. It is strictly responsible for planning, starting, stopping, and shifting your attention from one stimulus to another. On a good, well-rested day, this manager directs traffic perfectly. But what happens when this entire system is strained by the relentless demands of modern life? Transitions suddenly feel disproportionately hard. It is not just about the act of brushing your teeth. It is the deep, sinking dread of opening a single email. It is the immense physical exhaustion of deciding to take a shower. A 2025 explainer on executive dysfunction described this exact phenomenon perfectly. It noted that task initiation problems mean you might know exactly what you need to do, but you feel trapped behind an invisible barrier. You stare at the required task. You negotiate with yourself internally. You feel physically drained just thinking about starting. The cognitive bridge has completely collapsed. The core issue hiding beneath this is something called cognitive flexibility. This is your precise neurological ability to adapt and switch between different tasks smoothly. When your cognitive flexibility is tapped out, changes do not just feel annoying, they feel genuinely threatening or overwhelming. Your sensory gating mechanism starts to malfunction. Shifting your attention becomes a painfully difficult endeavour. The transition from one activity to another becomes a mountain you simply do not have the metabolic energy to climb. A recent counselling breakdown asked a brilliant question that changes everything. Why is switching tasks somehow significantly harder than actually doing the task itself? The answer is shifting. The answer lies entirely in cognitive shifting. To switch tasks, your brain actually has to do three heavy things at once. First, it has to forcefully stop what you are currently doing, fighting against its own momentum. Second, it has to mentally wipe the slate clean, clearing out working memory. And third, it has to load a completely new set of instructions into your prefrontal cortex. For some people, This exact neurological reset is the hardest, most demanding part of the entire day. Let us look at the 4-step bill your brain receives every single time you attempt to change tasks. Stop, switch, start, and focus. Every single stage draws cash from a highly limited daily pool of executive function currency. Switching tasks literally costs your brain more calories and effort than simply continuing the same task indefinitely. You spend this executive cash all day long at work. You spend it masking your true personality to fit in with societal expectations. You spend it reacting to endless phone notifications. You even spend this cash on chronic, invisible rumination. By the time it is 10 at night and time to simply brush your teeth, your cognitive bank account is entirely overdrawn. When that pool is empty, the very next transition feels exactly like hitting an invisible wall. Your brain looks at the cost of the transition, checks its empty wallet, and aggressively pulls the emergency brake to protect your system. You are not actively choosing to stay on the couch. Your brain is aggressively conserving its very last drop of fuel. Let us talk about what this looks like in neurodivergent communities. There is a specific clinical term for this invisible wall. It is called autistic inertia, or ADHD paralysis. It is not just a quirky habit or a minor inconvenience. It is a profound, almost physical inability to start, stop, or switch tasks, even when your intentions are crystal clear. You can stay completely stuck in one single activity for hours, desperately wanting to stop, but finding yourself entirely unable to break the neurological loop. Imagine sitting in your car with your foot slammed heavily on the gas pedal. Your foot is on the gas, but the emergency brake is fully engaged. The engine is roaring loudly. The desire to move is undeniably there, but the vehicle does not inch forward. This is exactly what ADHD paralysis feels like inside your body. You are frozen in place. You might be doom scrolling, your eyes completely glazed over, while a voice in your head silently screams at you to just put the phone down. You know exactly what you should be doing, yet your physical body refuses to comply. A 2026 clinical guide on autistic inertia perfectly captured this immense struggle. It explicitly noted that when the bottleneck is task initiation or set shifting, telling someone to simply try harder usually just causes harm. Telling you to try harder only increases your baseline stress and triggers conditioned cortisol release. The issue has absolutely nothing to do with your motivation. The problem is the transition mechanism itself. The gears of your mind are trying to shift without any clutch fluid. It grinds, it sparks, and eventually the entire system shuts down to protect itself from damage. This completely shatters the toxic myth of laziness. Laziness is a conscious choice. Laziness feels deeply relaxing. Laziness is actively enjoying the act of doing absolutely nothing. But this specific paralysis? It is agonizing. You are hyper-aware of your own forced inaction. The shame and guilt compound by the minute as you sit there. These clinical descriptions match your couch-to-bathroom wall exactly. You know you need to move. You care deeply about your hygiene, your routines, and your sleep. And yet, your start, stop, and switch machinery stubbornly refuses to engage. But there is a darker, highly biological reason why some of you experience this so intensely. You might be thinking this is a permanent flaw in your character, that you are somehow uniquely broken and destined to lose hours of your life staring at the wall. But it all comes down to the neurochemical currency of human motivation. We are going to look at the exact molecule responsible for your paralysis, because once you understand how your brain funds movement, you win. Let us talk about dopamine. Pop culture constantly tells you that dopamine is just the pleasure chemical. But that is a profound, dangerous oversimplification. Dopamine is actually the brain's ultimate go signal. It is centrally tied to physical movement and the complex anticipation of future reward. Neuroscience work focusing on the basal ganglia circuits in your brain reveals something absolutely fascinating. Dopamine acts as the great tiebreaker between your desire to move and your body's desire to stay perfectly still. It literally funds the transition. In a healthy, well-rested brain, adequate dopamine levels immediately strengthen the go pathways located deeply within the striatum to force movement. At the exact same time, dopamine actively weakens the stop pathways. This beautiful, invisible chemical dance is what enables self-initiated movement. It is what allows a person to effortlessly decide to stand up and walk down the hall to the bathroom. But when those vital dopamine levels are depleted, the entire neurological equation collapses. The stop pathway suddenly becomes dominant, physically trapping you in place. A famous Northwestern University study proved exactly how this works in real time. They found that artificially boosting dopamine strengthened the synapses between the cortex and the striatum directly in the go circuit. But in subjects severely depleted of dopamine, the exact opposite happened. In depleted subjects, the stop circuit took over completely. The researchers described it beautifully. They said it was exactly like a car with its foot completely jammed on the brake. That is you, sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the hallway. A comprehensive 2016 review on dopaminergic impairments further confirmed this reality. Striatal dopamine, operating specifically through D1 and D2 receptors, fundamentally promotes movement. When you have a significant reduction in these specific receptors, your spontaneous movement drops off an absolute cliff. You literally lose the spontaneous, subconscious urge to shift your physical state. You are not fighting a lack of willpower, you are fighting a drought. When you are paralyzed on the couch, you are fighting a severe, localized chemical drought in your frontal lobe. This brings us directly to how ADHD education materials connect this biology to everyday, frustrating behavior. People with ADHD frequently have chronically lower baseline dopamine levels, particularly in the frontal and striatal regions of the brain. These are the exact regions that heavily support task regulation and task switching. This chronic deficit contributes to significantly reduced neural flexibility overall. It means that every single task switch costs an ADHD brain vastly more than it costs a neurotypical brain. The world wants you to fix this with a planner, but you need neurochemistry. Have you ever heard of the interest-based nervous system? It is a neurological model that perfectly explains ADHD and neurodivergent attention. For most average people, the sheer importance of a task is enough to trigger action. If taxes are due, they simply do them. But an interest-based nervous system does not care about societal importance. It is only reliably triggered by interest, intense novelty, unique challenge, or extreme urgency. Why? Because those four specific things naturally force the brain to release a massive, sudden surge of dopamine. When novelty, challenge, or urgency are totally absent from the environment, your brain simply stalls out. Think about the act of brushing your teeth at night. There is zero novelty in brushing your teeth. There is zero challenge. It is the exact opposite of an urgent, adrenaline-pumping crisis. Because it lacks these specific dopamine-triggering elements, your brain flat-out refuses to provide the chemical funding needed to initiate the sequence. No matter how important the task may be to your overall health or routine, the biological paywall remains firmly in place. From this perspective, changing your physical state from sitting to standing is a tightly regulated, dopamine-gated transition. If your baseline dopamine is already entirely depleted from a long, stressful day of masking your traits, there simply is not enough funding left to flip the balance. You feel the intense, logical desire to get ready for bed, but your brain absolutely cannot spark the ignition. You are quite literally out of neurochemical gas. Let us put the executive functioning pieces and the dopamine pieces together into one clear picture. Researchers and clinicians have identified a few converging mechanisms that perfectly create this invisible wall. The first mechanism is the sheer, overwhelming cost of task initiation itself. Initiating a completely new action requires complex prefrontal planning combined instantly with striatal go signal activation. It is a highly coordinated, incredibly expensive neurological event that demands peak energy levels from an already totally exhausted system. When your executive resources are severely depleted at the end of the day, you experience this biological cost as disproportionate, agonizing effort just to start moving. The second mechanism is the cumulative, hidden cost of task switching throughout your day. Remember that four-step process: stop, switch, start, focus. If you have already spent your entire cognitive budget on hundreds of micro switches, answering emails, checking texts, perfectly managing your tone of voice, you are operating in a state of deep cognitive bankruptcy. Your brain actively recognizes this dangerous bankruptcy and immediately goes into a severe defensive posture. It actively refuses further transitions to protect itself from burnout. Your brain refuses transitions to protect you from total systemic failure. Even a tiny, trivial task, like walking to the bathroom sink, is perceived by your nervous system as a massive threat to its remaining energy reserves. And finally, there is the immovable dopamine threshold. If the anticipated reward of the new task does not generate enough dopamine to overcome the immense metabolic cost of switching, initiation fails immediately. Think about the raw mathematical calculation your brain is doing in that moment. You are currently engaging in a low-effort, high-dopamine activity, like scrolling endlessly through social media. You are asking your brain to abandon this highly profitable, comfortable state. You are asking it to trade that comfort for a high-effort, incredibly low dopamine activity like cleaning your teeth. Neurologically speaking, it is a terrible, unprofitable trade. Your brain rejects the proposal outright. This is exactly why it feels physically impossible to move, even as you sit there, consciously watching yourself waste time. You are running headfirst into a brutal neurochemical and executive paywall, not a tragic willpower deficit. The world desperately wants you to fix this. They offer you endless planners, loud alarms, and toxic productivity hacks. They tell you to just count to 3, be an adult, and stand up. But I am going to tell you something completely and radically different. I am going to tell you why you should actually double down on exactly how your brain works. Because the very same mechanism that traps you on the couch is responsible for your greatest, most undeniable cognitive superpower. Let us look at the flip side of the invisible wall. You have absolutely experienced the exact opposite of this paralysis. Think deeply about the rare times when you finally do manage to get moving. Once you are deeply engaged in something you actually care about, you can go for 10 hours without stopping once. You forget to eat your meals, you forget to drink water, you barely even notice the passage of time as the sun goes down. ADHD and autistic inertia resources note a vital truth here. They note that this powerful inertia cuts both ways. The invisible wall works in both directions. Starting is incredibly, painfully hard, yes, but once you have successfully started, you possess a massive, unfair advantage over neurotypical brains. You find it extremely difficult to stop or switch away from the new activity. Your brain's stubborn reluctance to transition suddenly becomes an unmatched superpower of pure endurance. While other normal people are constantly distracted, easily switching tasks and losing their train of thought every 5 minutes, you are entirely locked in. You become an unstoppable, singular force of momentum. ADHD organizations have a highly specific, scientific name for this exact state. They call it hyperfocus. It is an intense, fiercely prolonged state of concentration on a task that is genuinely interesting or suddenly urgent. During hyperfocus, your productivity absolutely skyrockets past average human limits. You experience a complete loss of time awareness, plunging deeply into a state of uninterrupted flow. This magic happens because the task has finally activated sufficient dopamine levels, allowing your basal ganglia's go circuit to completely and totally dominate your nervous system. When that unique interest or high-stakes urgency provides enough dopamine, your entire system floods with the necessary premium fuel to sustain aggressive action almost indefinitely without feeling fatigued. In other words, your entire neurological system is heavily optimized for deep, punishing momentum. It is fundamentally not designed for shallow, rapid, modern task switching. It requires a massive, painful, upfront energy cost to transition your body from rest to motion. But once that forward motion actually begins, and the dopamine finally starts flowing, it costs you almost nothing to stay locked in that state. This specific biological architecture gives you a profound, almost unfair advantage in the modern world. We currently live in an economy defined by cheap distraction. Most people are completely and totally incapable of doing long, immersive, deeply complex work because their attention is fragile. Average people are constantly context switching, checking their phones every 3 minutes, fracturing their attention into worthless, tiny pieces. But your brain is physically wired to violently resist context switching. Your brain builds a massive wall to keep all distractions out once you finally achieve real momentum. The very glitch that makes small, mundane transitions disproportionately painful, like going from the couch to the toothbrush, is the exact same architecture that allows you to master complex skills, build intricate systems, and dive deeper than anyone else is willing to go. You are not broken in the slightest. You are simply operating a heavy-duty freight train in a fragile world built for sports cars. Yes, a massive freight train takes an incredible amount of energy and time just to get rolling. It takes patience to build up steam. It absolutely cannot easily turn on a dime or rapidly weave through daily traffic. But once that freight train is moving at full speed, absolutely nothing can stand in its way. It will crash right through any obstacle placed in front of it. That train is your mind. Society has loudly convinced you that because you struggle to start the engine for mundane, boring tasks, the entire train must be defective. But science tells a completely different story. Science calls it hyper-efficiency for deep, complex tasks. Your brain is aggressively guarding its capacity for true depth. So the very next time you find yourself stuck on the couch, staring blankly at the hallway, feeling the crushing weight of the invisible wall, I need you to stop beating yourself up. Stop calling yourself lazy. Recognize exactly what is actually happening beneath your skull. Your executive function pool is currently drained. Your dopamine reserves are totally tapped out. Your brain is simply making a highly rational, biologically sound calculation to carefully conserve its remaining energy. It is putting the brakes on to protect you from burning out entirely. Instead of fighting the invisible wall with brute force willpower, which you already know does not work, try gently changing the neurochemical equation. Find a way to introduce a tiny, low-stakes drop of novelty into the environment. Play a highly specific song that triggers a strong emotional response. Shift the lighting just enough to give your basal ganglia the tiny dopamine spark it desperately needs to fund the physical transition. Work closely with your biology instead of constantly apologizing for it to people who do not understand. Because your specific wiring is not a tragic flaw to be medicated away or hidden. Your wiring is a highly specialized evolutionary adaptation. The world is utterly obsessed with the concept of the average. It wants everyone to be universally capable of starting and stopping 100 trivial, meaningless tasks a day without friction. But you are absolutely not built for the average. You are built for profound depth. You are built for the exact kind of intense, immersive, unrelenting focus that actually moves the world forward and solves real problems. Never forget that the temporary cost of your incredible hyperfocus is simply the friction of your mundane transitions. It is a biological trade that is more than worth making. If this deep dive resonated with you, if you finally feel completely seen instead of unfairly judged, then you belong here. Hit subscribe and join the tribe of people who think exactly like this. Discovering more about your unique wiring is the first step to mastering it. You are not broken. Keep protecting your momentum.